Gautam Adani, the billionaire boss of the Adani Group, could face a lengthy trial in the US over charges related to his alleged involvement in the multi-billion-dollar fraud and bribery scheme. So what is Adani charged with? The indictment alleges that Adani and his co-defendants agreed to pay over $250 million in bribes to Indian officials to obtain solar contracts worth an estimated $2 billion over 20 years. Adani is charged with foreign bribery, securities fraud conspiracy, and wire fraud conspiracy. Now, US law allows prosecutors to charge executives with foreign bribery when their companies do business in the US. They also give broad jurisdiction over transactions that pass through US financial institutions. Now, a Reuters report stated that arrest warrants were issued in the US for Gautam Adani and his nephew Sagar Adani. Now, if Adani is in India, US prosecutors would need to ask the Indian government to extradite him under the terms of the two countries' extradition treaty. That process would be handled by an Indian court, which would need to consider several factors. For instance, whether the crime that he was charged with in the US is also a crime in India, whether the charges are politically motivated, or whether he could face inhumane treatment in the US. Adani could fight extradition, and it is unclear how long the process might take. Now, Adani has not entered a plea and he has not appeared in front of a US court, according to Reuters. Now, Adani has two options. Number one, appealing against the charges, and number two, exploring settlement options. So can Adani dispute these charges in the court? Yes, Adani can dispute the charges, but initially his lawyers can only challenge the indictment on procedural grounds, such as questioning US prosecutors' authority to charge him. Once he appears in US court, his lawyers could argue that the charges are legally flawed or unsupported by facts. However, it is difficult to get criminal charges dismissed early in a case, as prosecutors are given the benefit of doubt. Now, Adani can also negotiate a plea deal with the prosecutors for a lighter sentence, but this would require the prosecutor's agreement and a judge's approval. When could a trial for Adani happen? A trial could still be a long way off even if Adani is extradited or surrenders in the US. What penalties is he looking at? If convicted, Adani could face decades in prison as well as monetary penalties. However, any sentence would ultimately be up to the judges overseeing the case. Adani faces up to 5 years in prison for foreign bribery and up to 20 for securities fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy charges. A jury of 12 would need to unanimously vote to convict Adani, and he could appeal a verdict against him. Now, the Adanis have not only denied the allegations and called them baseless, but also said that they will seek all possible legal recourse. There is an appeal process in the US which they can opt for. There will be an impact on their funding, and the project borrowing costs can go up as a result of this case. But they can appeal and eventually opt for settlement like other companies have done in the past, said Sriram Subramaniam of InGovern Research. Now, settlements usually involve significant fines, stricter compliance, independent monitoring, and limited future restrictions like reduced access to US funding. Settling could stabilize investor sentiment but may still impose significant financial and reputational costs. Future capital raising effort, especially internationally, could remain challenging, Narinder Vadva, managing director SKI Capital, said. He added that Adani's initial defensive stance is likely a strategy to assess the strength of evidence while preparing for negotiations.